This episode of The Casual is brought to you in part by Squarespace. For all your website needs, Squarespace delivers it in an all-around package to help you build a beautiful, integrated online presence.
Let's face it, buying into fashion can be dummy expensive. It's an expensive prospect altogether. If you're going for either some of the best stuff or at least the stuff that suits your taste exactly, it's going to be a stress on your wallet. Some labels exemplify this fact to a great degree and have become some of the most incredibly desirable labels on the planet. Problem is, it's very difficult to get involved because, well, most of us don't have the ends to buy in, literally. So today it's 7 labels you wish you had the money to buy, but also we thought we'd throw in some alternatives that are just a tad bit cheaper, but have the same kind of style and feeling to it. Whatever you wanna call it. Intro. Rick Owens. Rick Owens is probably one of the most popular labels in the world, but you wouldn't think it because of the price tag. Like, who's gonna get it? It's super expensive. Rick easily hits the $1,000 USD mark with its cut and sew pieces, and a simple tee could run you back several $100s. Even its dark shadow entry point is quite expensive, sending cats back several $100 for a pair of sneakers or his coveted pod pants. However, despite its price, Rick still has fans who opt for archival Rick Owens if they can't get it at retail. In fact, there's an entire community dedicated to the acquisition of Rick in the aftermarket. But even on those markets, it's still up there, and there's no guarantee you'll get what you want in your size at the price that you're willing to pay. And unfortunately, that's the alternative for Rick, the aftermarket. Truth is, nothing is quite like that label outside of some underground Japanese labels like Nude Masahiko Maruyama and First Aid to Injured, and Julius is probably the closest. Those are kinda cheaper than Rick, and at best they're Rick adjacent rather than full-blown category of Rick-like. So you got your hands tied with Rick Owens. I just thought that needed to go first. We just need to set the standard right there. Mastermind, Japan. Mastermind is one of those classic labels that people have wanted for years, and then it fell out of favor, then it came back, and now it's a bit different than when it was first introduced. All that being said, Mastermind is still a highly coveted label and easily a classic Japanese high street pioneer, but it is dummy expensive, at least the main line is. Sure, it doles out collabs from time to time and it has several offshoots, but they all pale in comparison to the true vision of the label. As a result, it's one of the few labels that, because of its price tag and its inaccessibility, because in Japan, it can often be more trouble than it's worth. And it's received a lot of backlash for that, particularly from fans in the West. That's why, if we're talking alternatives, it has to go to probably ACW, a Cold Walls Diffusion label, Undercover Mad Store, CDG Black, or CDG, that new thing that CDG is doing. That's a lot of CDGs, but you get it. Those labels may not have the exact same aesthetic as Mastermind, but in many ways, if you put them together the right way, you can definitely fit that bill. Keep in mind, those labels aren't super cheap, just a bit better on the wallet than Mastermind's often bizarre pricing structure, and they're readily available. Sakai, this is one of my favorites, but I'll tell you my problems. In recent years, Sakai has become incredibly popular, primarily due to its partnership with Nike, and that has catapulted the label into stardom. But that came with a bit of surprise to mostly the street crowd that hadn't really paid attention to the brand in the past. What they found in researching is a highly technical label in Sakai sans logos with daring pieces and a price tag that sent chills down the spine of their wallet. Sakai has amazing pieces, but it's really hard to take part in even with their seasonal discount. Pieces easily go for the thousands, and you could just barely get it outside of Japan. But that's okay, because needles and nepenthes fit the Sakai bill better than most brands. They are Japanese, but both labels are readily available out west. And while not as technical as Sakai, both labels are a great departure from typical Western labels and familiar enough to add to a more playful or experimental wardrobe. Ready-made. This is actually for somebody. Somebody have requested me talk about ready-made, so we're gonna talk about ready-made. This is for you, dog. All right, so Yuta Hosokawa's ready-made is probably the biggest enigma in fashion. On one end, it's pretty well known for such a small operation, as it's been worn by some of the biggest acts out west. It also has some high-profile collabs that has put it in the spotlight a bit. However, on the other end, ready-made just isn't readily available. On two fronts no less. One, fat chance getting it outside of Japan. The materials used to make the label are limited, and sending any good amount of those pieces outside of the country would prove to be an even more expensive endeavor, let alone problematic. And two, even with it being available in Japan, it still fetches one of the largest price tags for any label out here. While the brand primarily is clutch and bag, Yuta has put his skills to the test with some very covetable pieces that are simply timeless. Seriously, ready-made can stay in your closet forever and will always be special, if you can get it. That means you'll likely be looking for alternatives like porter to cool your thirst a little bit. It has a lot of option material-wise. However, there is a standard porter look that isn't that adventurous once you notice the format. The other option is FCE, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite. It's usually standard bag silhouettes, but they implement different fabrics and techniques that are sure to pique the fancy of the experimental inclined. Both porter and FCE are Japanese, but porter is very easy to get outside of Japan. It's available. FCE, on the other hand, might be a bit harder, but considering ready-made outpaces the price of both of these labels by almost 10 times the amount in most cases, we can forgive the hoops we have to jump through just to get some good bags.
But before we continue, we gotta give a moment for our partners at Squarespace. We've been with them for a minute, not just because they provide professional templates, robust backend analytics, professional email options, or even integrations with major social, business, and fashion platforms, but also because presentation, especially in the fashion biz, is important, and Squarespace provides you with amazing presentation in a simple format that can get you started in no time. Plus, everyone watching gets a 10% discount when you start by using our link squarespace.com/thecasual. So now you got your ideas, the code, and a way to showcase. Get it going today with Squarespace. Now back to it.
Junior Watanabe Man. Junior Watanabe Man is underappreciated by the mainstream, but it's certainly celebrated by the more discerning fashion enthusiasts. I'm not saying that you're not, I'm just saying that there's a lot of people who are fans of it. To be honest, all chips on the table, JWM is one of the most popular and profitable labels under the CDG banner, which is saying something to be sure. That fact may seem odd to some of you out there, as finding Junior on the street isn't necessarily the easiest prospect, and that's mainly due to the fact that the label is incredibly pricey considering its offerings. Pieces reach the thousands, but again, it's one of those timeless labels that's more investment than trend chasing that's employed by some of the bigger labels on the planet. So if you're getting into Junior, you're gonna have a little bit of commitment involved in that. The good thing is, finding labels within the same ethos as Junior Watanabe Man isn't necessarily difficult, particularly in Japan, where JWN isn't necessarily unique in its approach. Fundamental is a fantastic alternative at a very generous price range. It does get pricey, but not at the same level as Man, of course. Surprisingly, I would put Human Made in that discussion as well if you're more street inclined. While JWN is certainly not a street label as Human Made is, pieces do employ very similar techniques across both brands. Human Made pricing is far better for the normal person, so fair enough. There. Also, United Arrows and Sons also has some interesting takes that are ultimately just as timeless as Man, with about a fourth of the price tag in many cases. Yoji Yamamoto, mainline. This is for me, I'm speaking of myself. Speaking of Yoji, it's personally one of my favorite labels, and as such, it's a big biatch to buy, considering a level of commitment, again, is necessary to fully appreciate. One, because it goes together incredibly well. All of Yoji's pieces really go together well. And mixing it with something that's less than Yoji inspired in your wardrobe is pretty difficult. I mean, basically you can't half-ass Yoji is the point. It's the reason Yoji fans, particularly Western ones, are some of the most knowledgeable fashion heads you'll ever meet. Why? Because it's a must in actually acquiring some of the pieces. They have to be knowledgeable. Seriously, if you ever wanna know how to buy archival stuff from Japan or just buy from Japan, ask a Yoji fan. They know pretty much everything as a necessity, which sometimes gets into an unfortunate gatekeeping, but that's a whole nother story. It happens though. The good thing is Yoji has a ton of inspired labels that take on its methodology, from the underground to the budget variety. But the best middle ground has to go to Yoji itself, meaning the entire company. Under the Yoji banner, there are several labels, and the best to get involved at the initial stage, at the beginner stage, not really beginner, it's a really good label, the brand is called Sight, which is basically Yoji-based silhouette without the runway nuance. It has its own collections to be sure, but it comes at about the fourth of the price. Pieces are pretty minimal, but considering the quality and the source, you can't get much better than Sight. The more street inclined Ground Y is available, also under the Yoji Yamamoto banner. I personally steer clear, as it oftentimes can be a bit too liberal in its street approach, whatever that means, but they do have some good collaborations if you're involved in that. So definitely check those out if you're a Yoji fan and you want to at least get something that is Yoji and not as pricey. And finally on this list, we got Capital. For starters, Capital isn't really that expensive, at least in Japan. And the only reason why we're talking about Capital at this point is because so many people are enamored with it out west. I think it's like the biggest brand in the world. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. Those hyped up prices you see from Capital are primarily from people who know it's virtually impossible to get it outside of Japan, at least now. And the vendors that do have it charge a premium because of that, which is sad considering the view of the brand here in Japan. Hint, it's not as hype as some make it out to be. In fact, it's not hype at all. All that considered, Capital is an amazing and notable label with a bevy of fans, but due to its premium charge and its locale, it's hard to get and hard to pay for. Which begs the question, what is the alternative for Capital? One could employ the infrequent, albeit popular, cactus plant flea market, which, if we're being honest, takes some of the same themes as Capital. I don't know, maybe you do that. But an entirely better approach is to thrift and remake. Seriously, if you love Capital, then thrifting and applying your own upcycle work is the way to go. And you may be thinking, I don't wanna go that far, just give me the clothes, bruh. To which I say, well, then you certainly don't get Capital. At least not to what the creators intend. And if you like fashion from Capital, you should really consider it. Everyone that works for Capital is an artisan of sorts. So creation and collecting and repurposing is kind of the thing. Totally waiting for Capital to bring out a dope piece because it's Capital shouldn't and isn't the point. It's why you don't see Capital collabs all over the place. The brand is incredibly internalized. So it stands to reason that as a fan of Capital, it isn't about waiting for them to do something, it's about you doing something. So thrift and upcycle stuff. That's what Capital would do and what they've done. That being said, this list could go on, and a great many of these were Japanese labels. So why not suggest some others you'd like to see on another list? More succinctly, what other brands do you wish you had the funds to buy? Or maybe give us suggestions on good mid-range labels that are great options and alternatives. All is welcome, everything, just do that. It should be fun, but most importantly, keep it locked right here for all of your info on international fashion, culture, and business from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. And I'll see you guys in a minute.